My dad left us for his dream life. Then came back when he needed money. I was 13 the day my dad left. He packed a single duffel bag, tossed his work boots into the back of his truck, and drove off without looking back. No dramatic goodbye. No final hug. Just the sound of his old Chevy rattling down our gravel driveway. Mom stood in the kitchen, hands shaking as she poured herself a glass of orange juice she never drank. I remember asking her if he was coming back, and she just said, "I don't know, honey. I really don't." Growing up in rural Kentucky, we didn't have much, but we had enough, until we didn't. Dad was a plumber, Mom worked part-time at the post office. Money was always tight, but they somehow made it work. Until Dad got this wild idea that he was meant for more. He used to talk about starting his own business, living on the coast, and making real money. Said he was tired of scraping pennies for a family that didn't appreciate him. What he meant was, he was tired of responsibility. When he left, things got worse real fast. We lost the house 6 months later. Mom, my sister June, and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that always smelled like dryer sheets and mildew. June and I shared a bed for almost 2 years. Mom worked double shifts and still came home smiling, for us. Fast forward 15 years. I'm 28 now, living in Nashville, working IT for a decent-sized logistics company. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and it gives me stability, something I never had growing up. June's a nurse, married with 1 kid and another on the way. We talk every other day, mostly to make sure Mom's okay. She retired early due to some medical issues. Arthritis, bad back, and honestly, too much stress. The kind of quiet damage that builds up over a lifetime of carrying too much alone. Then last Thanksgiving, everything changed. We were all gathered at June's house. The turkey was dry, the cranberry sauce was straight from the can, and the living room was way too small for 8 adults and 3 toddlers. It was chaotic, but in a good way. Then the doorbell rang. June opened the door, and her face froze. Standing there, wearing a weathered leather jacket and holding a 6-pack of Coors like it was a peace offering, was our dad. "I heard there was a family dinner," he said, smiling like he'd just gotten back from the grocery store, not like he'd ghosted us for nearly 2 decades. No one said anything for a full 10 seconds. Then Mom stood up from the couch, walked over, and slapped him across the face so hard the beer dropped out of his hand. "You don't get to show up here like this," she said, her voice calm but shaking. Dad just rubbed his cheek and mumbled, "I deserve that." He tried to explain. He'd moved to Florida, started his own plumbing company, did well for a few years, until he didn't. Said he lost everything in a bad investment with a business partner, who turned out to be a scam artist. Claimed he'd been sleeping in his van for the last 3 months, and came back because he wanted to make things right. June told him to get out. I just stood there, shocked. "But Mom," she hesitated. And that hesitation? That opened the door. Over the next month, Dad started calling. Then visiting. Helping with odd jobs around Mom's house. Fixing the roof. Mowing the lawn. Slowly, he started worming his way back into her life. And maybe she was just lonely. Maybe she wanted to believe he had changed. But I didn't buy it for a second. Then came the twist. One night, I stopped by Mom's house to drop off some groceries, and I saw Dad's truck in the driveway. I walked in to find them sitting at the kitchen table, Mom crying, Dad looking desperate. "What's going on?" I asked. They both looked at me like I'd just walked in on a secret. Dad sighed and said, "Son, I need help. I got an opportunity to buy into a new business. It's a second chance. But I'm short, $25,000. I laughed. Out loud. "You've got to be kidding me." "It's not like that," he insisted. "I've learned from my mistakes. This is solid. It's a construction company out in Chattanooga. They just need a cash investor." Mom tried to defend him, said she believed in second chances. But I saw the fear in her eyes. The same fear from when I was a kid, watching her dig through couch cushions for enough change to buy bread. "I'm not giving you a dime," I said. He didn't ask June directly, but we both knew she'd say no too. But then, a week later, I found out Mom took out a loan. She put her house up as collateral and gave him the money behind our backs. I didn't believe it at first. Mom taking out a loan? She was the most financially cautious person I knew. She kept her receipts in envelopes, still balanced a checkbook by hand, and once lectured me for buying a TV on a store credit card. So hearing from June that she'd gone to the bank, mortgaged her house, and handed Dad $25,000 felt surreal. I drove straight to her place. "Tell me it's not true," I said as soon as she opened the door. She stepped aside silently and let me in. Her expression was unreadable, tired, maybe ashamed. "He promised he'd pay it back within 3 months," she said quietly. "He's working again. He just needed a little help. Mom, he hasn't been around for 18 years. You think he changed just because he mowed your lawn and fixed a leaky faucet?" She didn't answer. Instead, she sat down on the couch, wringing her hands like she used to when the power company sent final notices. That night I called June. She was furious, of course, but more than that, scared. "If she loses that house," she said, "there's nowhere for her to go. We can't just move her in with us. We've got a baby on the way, and you've seen our house." "I know," I said. "But Dad, he's playing her. And if she doesn't wake up soon, it's going to be too late." Then, 2 weeks later, he vanished again. No calls. No texts. No pickup at the job site he supposedly worked at. His phone went to voicemail. I even drove down to the address he listed on some paperwork. Turns out, it was a UPS store with mailbox rentals. Mom still tried to make excuses. "Maybe he's out of town, maybe something happened." I wasn't having it. So I started digging. It turns out, the construction company in Chattanooga? Total scam. It existed, sure, but it had no record of any recent hires or investors. No need for a cash injection. I even spoke to the actual owner. He'd never heard of my dad. When I told Mom, she finally broke down. She'd been holding on to this idea that maybe he really wanted to be part of the family again. That maybe time had changed him. That maybe people really do come back different after hitting rock bottom. But they don't. Not him. Now we were left picking up the pieces, again. It would have ended there. Could have just been another chapter in a sad family saga. But life had other plans. About a month later, June called me from her husband's work phone. Her voice was shaky. "You need to get over to Mom's right now," she said. "There's something you need to see." I rushed over. She was already there, standing in the kitchen, holding a manila envelope. Mom sat at the table, red-eyed but calm. "It came in the mail this morning," she said, motioning to June. Inside the envelope was a letter. Not from Dad, but from a lawyer. It turns out Dad had passed away 2 weeks ago. Cardiac arrest in a cheap motel room in Alabama. His body had gone unclaimed until the state located his last known relative, Mom. But that wasn't all. He had a will. We were shocked. After everything, this man had written a will? The contents were even more bizarre. Apparently, he'd left behind a storage unit in Florida. And inside, according to the lawyer, were valuable personal effects and a safe deposit box key. The will stated that the contents were to be split between my children in equal parts. I didn't know what to think. Was this another trick? A dead man's game? June and I argued for days about what to do. Was it even worth the trip? Did we really want to dig through the wreckage of his second life? But curiosity, and the slim chance that there might be some money left, won out. So, 2 weeks later, we flew to Florida. The storage facility was one of those climate-controlled complexes nestled between a rundown strip mall and a used car dealership in Clearwater. It looked ordinary enough, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a bored clerk behind the front desk scrolling through her phone. But I had a knot in my stomach the whole time. The woman at the desk led us to Unit B14. She handed me a key and said, "There's also a note in there with contact instructions." That's all I know. June stood beside me, arms crossed tight, her mouth a thin line. Neither of us said a word as I turned the key and pulled up the rattling metal door. The air inside smelled like dust and old motor oil. There were a few boxes stacked in the corner, some old tools, a duffel bag, and, exactly as promised, a small floor safe with a deposit box key taped to the top. But what grabbed my attention first was the framed photo sitting on a nearby crate. It was Dad, smiling, standing next to a woman we had never seen before. And 2 kids. Teenagers. "Who the hell are they?" June asked, taking a step forward. There was a handwritten note under the frame. "To my real family, my greatest joy." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Dad hadn't just left us. He replaced us. We dug through the rest of the boxes like we were hunting for proof it wasn't true, but the more we found, the worse it got. Birthday cards from Ben and Kayla. A homemade Father's Day mug that said, #1Dad, love you forever. A Christmas ornament with 4 names on it, including his. One box was full of tax records and receipts, proof that he'd been living in Tampa under a different last name. He had another family. A real house. He even coached Little League. For a man who always said he hated commitment, he sure committed to abandoning us. We found a letter in a sealed envelope addressed to Ben and Kayla. It started with, "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know I loved you both more than anything. I'm sorry I couldn't do more, but I tried my best." There was nothing like that for us. No apology. No explanation. June broke down. Not the kind of crying you can console. The kind where your soul cracks and spills out after decades of being held together by denial and duct tape. We sat on the concrete floor of that unit for hours, trying to piece together who this man really was. Eventually, I pried open the floor safe. Inside was $9,200 in cash, a Rolex, probably fake, and the key to the safe deposit box at a nearby SunTrust bank. There was also a handwritten note addressed to us, finally. But all it said was, "Sorry I couldn't fix it all. This is what I have left. Split it. I wish I had done more." That was it. No. "I love you." No. "I was wrong." No admission of guilt for stealing from our mom or asking for money under false pretenses. No mention of the second family, or the years of silence. Just, "Split it." The next day, we went to the bank and opened the safe deposit box. We expected maybe a few documents, a title, or more cash. But instead, we found something else. A sealed manila envelope marked, "Legal Confidential." Inside were adoption papers. Not for Ben or Kayla. For me. I stared at the form for what felt like forever. It was dated a few months before my 2nd birthday. And under, "Birth name," it said, Lucas Raymond Walker. Not the name I'd gone by all my life. I felt sick. Everything in me went cold. "June, did you know?" She looked just as stunned as I was. No. No, I swear I had no idea. The papers revealed something even stranger. My biological parents had given me up voluntarily, but the records were sealed. Only one line was legible. "Placement facilitated by personal request. See notes from D. Walker." Dad had adopted me. Mom must have known, but she never said a word. I suddenly had more questions than answers, and a family I wasn't even sure I was biologically part of. That night, after flying back to Nashville, I confronted Mom. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just showed her the papers and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at them, then looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "I was going to," she said softly. "But your father made me promise we'd wait until you were older. Then, he left. And I didn't know how to explain it without breaking you. But you let me think we were just a normal family. There's no such thing, baby," she said, stroking my hair like I was a child again. "But you're mine in every way that matters." I believed her. But it didn't erase the questions. Who were my real parents? Why did they give me up? And why did Dad specifically request me? I couldn't sleep after that. Not for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that name on the adoption papers, Lucas Raymond Walker. It was like discovering you were living someone else's life the whole time. But more than that, it was the feeling that Dad, who barely deserved the title, had some hand in all of it. Why me? Why adopt me? Why then? I started digging. It took a few weeks, but I tracked down the name of the lawyer who notarized the adoption. He was long retired, but his son still ran the firm. I called and explained the situation. He agreed to let me see what remained of the sealed records, provided I showed identification and a copy of the death certificate, which I had, courtesy of Dad's estate lawyer. What I found nearly floored me. Dad had been in a custody battle back in the 90s. Not over me, but over someone else's child. A girl named Heather. Apparently, he'd been involved with her mother during an affair while still married to Mom. The case file included a typed memo that said, Individual D. Walker declined biological claim on Heather in exchange for undisclosed arrangement involving minor child Lucas R.W. Undisclosed arrangement? I was traded. That's how it felt. Traded like a pawn in some twisted, backdoor family negotiation. I went home with copies and laid everything out for June. She read through it all slowly, quietly, then asked the one question I hadn't dared think too hard about. Do you think Mom knows about Heather? If she does, I said, she's been keeping it quiet for over 20 years. Then she gave me that look. The, are you sure you're ready for this? Kind of look. And she said, I think we need to ask her. We waited until Sunday, when we always did our group dinners. June's husband watched the kids while she and I sat Mom down in the living room and laid everything out. She went pale when she saw the memo. Her fingers trembled when she held it. I didn't know it went that far, she whispered. You knew about Heather? June asked, incredulous. Mom looked like she aged 10 years in that moment. He told me, back then, that he had made a mistake. That there was a girl, and the mother didn't want him involved. He said it was over and that he needed to make things right. And when he brought you home, she said, turning to me, I thought it was redemption. That maybe he was finally putting someone else ahead of himself. My throat felt tight. So, I was part of a deal. She shook her head. No. Don't think like that. You were my son the second I held you. Whatever he did, it doesn't define who you are. Maybe it didn't. But I still wanted to know who they were. Over the next few weeks, I tracked down leads. Public birth records, archived family court documents, even some old social media posts. And I found her. Heather Marlin. 24. Lives in Jacksonville. Works as a bartender and part-time artist. Public Instagram account with a bio that read, Daughter of Ghosts. I make peace with paint. I stared at her photo for a long time. She looked like him. Same eyes. Same crooked grin. Same aura of reckless charm. I debated messaging her for days. But in the end, I wrote something simple. Hi, Heather. I believe we may share a biological connection through your father. I'm not asking for anything, I just want to understand where we come from. She responded the next day. If your father is D. Walker, then congrats, we're half-abandoned siblings. You want to meet and trade trauma stories, or should we just start a support group? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. We agreed to meet the next weekend, halfway between Nashville and Jacksonville. June didn't want me going alone, so she came too. She said it felt like closing a chapter, or maybe starting a new one. Heather was blunt, sarcastic, and fiercely guarded. But underneath all that, I saw a mirror of myself. Someone who spent her whole life looking for answers in people who were never going to give them. She told us her mother had received a cash settlement from Dad's lawyer when she agreed to drop the custody case. That was the undisclosed arrangement. Heather had always suspected there was more to the story, but her mom refused to talk about it. He bought his way out of being my father, she said, and apparently bought his way into your life. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. We kept in touch after that. Not siblings in the traditional sense, but bonded by something heavier. A shared inheritance of silence and damage. Then, just when I thought the drama was behind us, something else surfaced. The IRS. Mom called me one evening in a panic. She had just gotten a letter saying she was being audited. Turns out, the $25,000 she took out and gave to Dad? He never reported it. Worse, he had used her name on multiple loan applications over the years. Some of them while living in Florida. Some forged. Some somehow co-signed. How the hell did he get my info? She cried over the phone. He lived here, remember? Had access to your mail. Your passwords. Everything. It was like he never stopped stealing, from us, from her, even after death. And the debt? It wasn't small. Almost $90,000 in fraudulent loans, interest, and penalties. June and I hired a lawyer immediately, but it was a mess. Some of it could be disputed as identity theft. But others? She'd signed things without reading. Believed him. Trusted him. And now, at 67 years old, she could lose her home. Again. We knew what we had to do. We were going to fight back. We hired a financial crimes attorney named Carla. Mid-40s, sharp as a knife, and absolutely no patience for deadbeat dads, even posthumously. When we showed her the paperwork, the forged documents, and the IRS letters, she whistled. He was either bold or incredibly stupid, she said. Probably both. Carla dove deep into Dad's finances and tracked down whatever she could. Most of his assets were gone, of course, gambled away, sold, or hidden. The house he'd lived in with his second family? Rented. His plumbing business? Long defunct, and the corporate name had been recycled by someone else. But there were breadcrumbs, tiny ones. One of them was a ledger. A handwritten, beat-up notebook we'd found buried in a toolbox in Mom's attic, tucked under piles of old Christmas lights and forgotten tax returns. I almost didn't open it, but something about the way it was hidden made me curious. Inside were notes. Pages and pages of financial scribbles. Payments, job numbers, customer names, even gas receipts. But one name kept repeating. Smith's Farm, $700 per month, shed number 3. The entries spanned nearly 8 years. And the last entry? Final drop. Don't forget the combo, December 29th, 47. It felt like something out of a movie. June and I exchanged a look. What the hell was he doing at a farm? We found it on Google, Smith's Farm Equipment and Storage, about an hour outside of Nashville. It was a private property, half old machinery, half rental sheds. We made the drive out early the next morning. An elderly man with oil-stained hands met us at the gate. Said he remembered our dad. Went by Danny down here. Paid in cash. Never caused trouble. Always left at sunset. He led us to shed number 3. A rusty old padlock held the door shut. I pulled out the combo. December 29th, 47. Click. The door creaked open. Inside was nothing fancy. Just a workbench, a few boxes, and a heavy red toolbox on the ground. We opened it. At first, it just looked like junk. Old wrenches, some dusty socket sets, and a pair of cracked safety goggles. But underneath the false bottom, we found a black duffel bag. And inside that? Cash. Bundles of it. Tightly wrapped, marked with dates. Some yellow with age. 10s and 20s, mostly. All in all? $64,000. And a folder. Inside the folder were documents, copies of contracts, notes, some kind of payment ledger Dad had kept off books. Turns out, he'd been running a cash side business under the table for years, even while broke and begging us for money. Plumbing gigs. Wiring. HVAC installs. You name it. And the most galling part? He'd never reported any of it. This was the rainy day fund he'd never tapped. Maybe he planned to. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't trust banks anymore. Or maybe, deep down, he always knew he'd need to vanish again one day. Well, we were going to use it now, to clean up the damage he left behind. We brought everything to Carla. She helped us set up a legal trust to pay off the IRS, clear Mom's name, and protect the funds from being seized. The way she explained it. Your father might have been a crook, but he accidentally left behind a way to make some of it right. June and I agreed. We wouldn't keep a cent for ourselves until Mom was secure. We used the money to pay off the remaining loan, hire a tax advisor, and set up a monthly fund for Mom's expenses. We even repaired her roof, replaced her beat-up washer, and stocked her freezer like it was Thanksgiving all over again. It wasn't everything she deserved, but it was a start. Then, 3 weeks later, I got another message from Heather. Just thought you should know, I found something too. Turns out, our dad had left a separate note for her. She'd only found it after cleaning out her mom's attic. It was brief, barely a paragraph. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I wanted to more than you know. But I messed everything up. Maybe one day you'll forgive me. If not, that's okay too. She ended the message to me with a single line. I still don't forgive him. But I don't hate you. If that matters. It did. Life settled after that. June's baby was born healthy, a boy named Caleb. Mom cried when she held him for the first time, whispering how happy she was that he never knew the kind of fear we did. Heather came up once for a visit. We took her out for barbecue and beers. She didn't stay long, but we sat out on the porch after, and for the first time, we laughed about the absurdity of it all. Shared trauma has a strange way of bonding you. Dad never got a funeral. No headstone. No service. His ashes, from what we were told, were claimed by the state and buried in a numbered plot outside Birmingham. But in a way, that felt right. He'd always been a ghost, disappearing, reappearing, haunting the lives he touched. Only now, we weren't afraid of the ghost anymore. We were done letting him write our story. We had our own chapters to live now. A year later, everything feels different. Not perfect. Not even peaceful, always. But clearer. We finally sold Dad's old truck, the same beat-up Chevy he drove away in all those years ago. After it sat in Mom's driveway for months, she handed me the keys and said, "Get that ghost off my property." I listed it online and got $2,800 for it. The guy who bought it wanted to restore it. For fun. I didn't tell him what that truck had meant to us, or what it had done. Just shook his hand and let him drive it away. We put the money in the trust. Mom said she didn't want a single cent in her checking account that came from him, directly or indirectly. Fair enough. June and I talk more now. Weekly calls became almost daily. Not always about heavy stuff, sometimes just about Caleb's latest tantrum, or the weather, but there's something healing in that consistency. In knowing your sibling is still there, despite everything you both went through. And Heather? She's still in Jacksonville. We don't talk every day, but she sends me photos sometimes. Her art is dark, honest, bold. She had a gallery showing in a small studio last month. I drove down for it. Didn't tell her I was coming, just showed up and left a note in her guest book. You turned the mess into something beautiful. Proud to call you sister. She messaged me later. I don't do siblings. But you're not the worst. That's about as sentimental as she gets. I'll take it. Mom's doing better now, too. She started walking every morning. Reads more. Laughs more. She even joined a local card club. Says they gossip too much, but she never misses a Thursday game. Sometimes I catch her looking at old photos. I ask her if she regrets any of it, staying with him so long, not telling me the truth, giving him money near the end. Her answer never changes. I did the best I could with what I had, she says. And I got you and June out of it. That's what matters. She's right. One day this spring, I drove out to a quiet cemetery just outside Birmingham. Found the numbered plot with his ashes. It wasn't hard, public records made it easy. I didn't cry. Didn't feel anything, really. But I stood there for a long time. And I said this out loud, to the air, to the grass, to the ghost I'd carried since I was 13. You've hurt a lot of people. You lied, you stole, and you left when we needed you most. But I'm not here to curse you. I'm here to let you go. I dropped a single photo on his marker. It was of Caleb, smiling at a family picnic. Not because Dad deserved to see it, but because I wanted him to know the story didn't end with him. It kept going. Better. Stronger. Kinder. Now, whenever someone asks me about my family, I tell them this. My father was a cautionary tale. My mother was a warrior. My sister was my anchor. And me? I'm the one who broke the cycle.